All right, hi, I'm Tom from Poseidon Sports. I thought I'd do a longer video to try and help you decide what out of the code foils range, what foils would suit you, what discipline you're doing, what fuses, what tails. So since I picked these up last week, I've been able to get out on the water pretty extensively in the last few days. I'm pretty cooked from pushing myself to see what the capabilities of each foil is, so I can really understand what each one does to be able to sell to you the right foil for what you're trying to achieve and where you're at. So the S series range, the guys won't tell me what the S means. They seem to laugh about it, so there might be an inside joke there, but I'm gonna call it smooth. That's one of the things I've noticed about this S series is how well it comes up on foil, how smooth this foil is when you're taking off, when you're riding, when you're pumping. I've noticed other foils a little bit pitchier. If you're taking off in bigger waves, they might come up really hard, have good bottom end, but not be that smooth when you're taking off. So if you're not making critical takeoffs when you're surfing, that's kind of one equation that is hard to manage. So this S series is really for surf, but also for winging. It's a really smooth, really well constructed foil. So I'll start with the 980S. This foil, I actually thought, so I'll explain, I prone, I sup, I downwind, and I wing a lot. I would say that I'm an intermediate advanced rider that has the ability to be really kooky and then really good at sometimes. So I wouldn't say I was a pro rider by any means, which is probably the best way for you to get good advice, because I can be totally crap sometimes and then other times okay. So the 980S, I thought this might be too big for me. I like smaller, faster foils when I'm surfing or when I'm winging. This actually proved me completely wrong. I really enjoyed riding this foil. So it again had really nice smooth takeoff when I was proning it. Once up and to speed, and it's actually got a really nice top end for, it's not even a big foil. It just, the S series rides as bigger foils. So it means that you can potentially, depending on where you're at, step down a foil size, which is what I've done. But I was so happy pumping this round. It really is effortless pumping. If you've got sort of beginner to intermediate technique, it's got really good bottom end. So if you sort of kook a little bit of a pump or you wobble, you still got enough bottom end that's going to save you. But if you've got intermediate to advanced technique, you can really pump around all day on this. The biggest span, they're all 9.5 aspect ratio as well. So it's not super high, it's not super low, it's not definitely not MA, it's got really good glide. It's about the aspect ratio I prefer for a little bit of speed, but a lot of efficiency when I'm pumping and proning around. So the 980 span in the square CM is pretty much what I would call a light wind or small wave front wing. I rode it in sort of a couple of 3-foot sets and it managed the top end speed really well. With that 980 span, if you do roll and breach a tip, these upturn wing tips on all the S series, as you've seen James rip, they breach really well, and allows you to ride out of situations whether you meant to breach a tip or not. So that means you're just staying on foil longer. The 980S, I actually downwinded it as well. So my downwind skills are beginner to intermediate. I can foil no problem, but my popping up on bumps, that's got some work to do. When I did get up on a bump, it was 40 to 50 knots and the bumps were really good. I was so happy with how well this foil performed in the bump. It really needed very little input from me in terms of cardio capacity to stay in the bump. If I wanted to move to another bump, I could bank left and right because it rolls really quite nicely. And if needed, it had enough top end that I could pump over the bump in front to get to the next trough. So I knocked out on my first paddle up in those 40 to 50 knots. I knocked out 780 meters before I ran out of beach. So once I was up, this really had a great bottom end to help get me up in the wind bumps, but it just sat there beautifully in a bay swell, so short period small periods, short fetch waves, but it was 50 knots, so there was some definitely bigger bumps overhead. But yeah, so the type of rider this would suit was beginner to intermediate, but even advanced in terms of that I had a lot of fun pumping around on this in what I could use it in onshore conditions and still be able to pump out. So I would not say this is a beginner foil. I would say this is a really good place to start, say if you're learning your prone foiling journey, if you are a 80 kilo rider. But even saying that, a lighter rider could use this because it doesn't have a lot of front foot pressure. It doesn't buck you up or buck you off. So prone surfing, sup foil surfing, downwind if you have some skills and the ability to stay on foil. For winging, this is what I'll use as my light wind wing because it has such a good bottom end. I actually really enjoy this. This surprised me more than I thought. So that's a really nice entry-level foil that can take you through to advanced riding. Now, if you do have a few more skills and perhaps this is not your first foil, or maybe it's your second foil, or you've been foiling for a little while, I used the 850S. That was the only foil that I had when I was into Maldives. I use this extensively in 1 foot up to 3, 4, sort of couple of 5 foot peaks. This foil has amazing pump and efficiency. It glides extremely well. So again, I'm 90 kilos, sort of intermediate. I really enjoyed the foil's range, bottom end and top end for both prone and winging. So its efficiency allowed me to pump around in really good conditions quite far for quite long. But in poorer conditions where it's light onshore, I could still pump this out. And I'll talk about the tails and the fuses that you can change to get a different feel. So this is like an intermediate to advanced riders all-round go-to wing in all sorts of conditions. I use this winging a lot. It's got a really good bottom end. Top end's probably like 20, 21 knots. You could probably flatten it out a little bit more, get a little more, bit more top end out of it if you wanted to. 21 knots, I think that's a really good speed, given how good the bottom end is. So again, just a really nice, smooth, all-round foil that's great for proning, great for sup foiling. You'd have to be probably James to downwind it, paddling up. But again, it's got really good bottom end. So if you did get up, you can stay in the bumps. You probably just need to give more rider input. So you'd like to probably be a little bit fitter in terms of your cardio capacity. But the wingtips breach so well. So for an 850 span, it rides like a bigger foil, but it turns like a smaller foil because you can breach the tips. That gives you a really good range. So a lighter rider could ride this as a beginner, but intermediate to advanced and heavier riders, and I'm 90 kilos, can ride this in all sorts of conditions for both prone, sup, and then for winging. It just was a really nice all-round go-to foil where maybe the wind's a little bit fickle, but you get enough of a gust to get up really quite easily, and you want to ride something smaller than your 980. So freestyling, you'll have to ask Marcus about that. I don't have the left ACL, so I don't jump. So that's generally wave riding and just winging around, having heaps of fun. What I have been waiting for to turn up was the 720S. I really am impressed by this foil because of its size. A little bit less wingspan just means that this foil rolls a little faster, a little less chord, even though it's the same aspect ratio, means it's a little more efficient through the water. I've found with riding other 700 square meter front foils that if the conditions aren't perfect, if I don't keep the foil nice and high in the water, that they can drop out in not perfect conditions. So I've been really happy that in sort of 10 knot, 1 foot low period, sort of mushy surf, that this foil had enough lift to get me up, and it had enough bottom end due to this really nice profile that I could pump it around in 10 knots. Obviously when it's 10 knots onshore and you're pumping into it, you're generating a lot of apparent wind. So it's the time when you can stall out, but paired with the right fuse and tail, this had really good bottom end that allowed me to ride a smaller foil in what I would have thought would have been a bigger foil condition. So again, most of these foils ride as bigger foils, but because of the span and the way they breach, they surf as smaller foils. For winging, I haven't had a couple of good sessions on this yet due to really fickle wind. I was really impressed that when I got a gust in 12 knots with a medium tail, medium fuse and the 142 tail, I was still able to get it up with good hand wing pumping technique and a downwind board. So again, you just need velocity, forward speed to get this up. Once it was up, I was able to pump it around. It didn't drop out when I pumped it. It rolls really nicely. I can still tack it as long as I maintain speed through the tack. So again, if you're an advanced prone rider, 90 kilos and under, you're gonna love this as your go-to prone foil. Subfoiling, you wanna be quite proficient. You've got a bigger board, so it depends on your weight. I haven't tested it out yet, but any foil that you can keep at speed, it's gonna have that lift. So it's that lift to velocity drag ratio. For winging, this is going to be my go-to wing. Anything above 15 knots and not fickle with waves, I'm just going to throw this on, and I reckon I can get a really good top end speed out of this, maybe 22 knots, which is as fast as I really want to go. Anything over that, when you stack on an 85 centimeter mast, your neck starts to know about it. So that's the S series. I'm really impressed with it. It can take you from beginner to advanced, and where your ability to personalize this equipment comes into the range of tails and the range of fuses that we've got. I look at fuses in two different ways, and they're 3 centimeters different, so there's 6 centimeters difference between the small and the large. If you think about a short wheelbase car turning around a roundabout, that's a tighter turn. It's more pitch sensitive, so in terms of freestylers, if you really want to jump, you can get quick, dramatic changes in pitch. If you've got a good pump cadence, you can get the benefits of, if you have a good efficient pump, you get the benefits of fast pumping cadence and really tight turning. If you think about a longer wheelbase vehicle turning around a roundabout, the turn is not as tight. It's a more drawn out turn, which is definitely not a bad thing, especially if you're riding bigger waves or if you're learning. But the pitch sensitivity is dulled down because it's really stable. It also gives more leverage to the tail wing, which is further away from the front wing. So both have its place. I proned the large fuselage and it just drew out my turns, but you could definitely feel as you're banking into a turn and accelerating how much more stable that is. It's not massive, but it's noticeable, and it does round out the turn a bit. I haven't had enough time to play on the small fuse. I've just actually found that the medium fuse has done everything I wanted to do. I find it the perfect sort of length to be able to work with how I pump and my cadence. But the other thing I like is that when I'm pumping up winging, that I can adjust the front wing because it's more of what I'm used to quite quickly when I want to pump it up. The longer fuse had just a slightly different way to get it up. I tend to rely on more board speed, so it comes up quite stable, whereas I enjoyed that I could change the pitch rapidly. I haven't winged the small yet, but I definitely think that's going to be great when it's windy and you want to do tight pocket turns. So I recommend the medium fuselage as an all-rounder. Then if you go small, you really want to know what you're doing and why you're doing that. The large would be great for beginners and heavier riders that want to get pitch stability. And a little bit more lift from the tail because you've got a longer lever, so you get more leverage. So in terms of tails, I had the 150, and that's centimeters, so squared. So the 150 is your perfect sort of all-rounder, same sort of aspect ratio as the front wings. I really enjoyed this on all foils. The 720, I find it fast and efficient, but also with enough leverage that when it is a little bit onshore, that I could still get enough push and lift from the tail because it's acting like a lever. If I did try the 720 with the 158 to try and see if I could pump it out in sort of onshore conditions. It definitely gave me more lift and changed actually a little bit of front foot pressure. So I think if you're beginning or you're a heavier rider, the 158 would be perfect if you're trying to use a smaller foil. If you're learning downwind and want to subfoil and you're a heavier rider, the 158 paired with the 980 would be a beautiful learn to prone, learn to sup, learn to wing combination. As you get better and you want more efficiency, or if you're a lighter rider, if you're more skilled, you can drop down to the 150 and the 142, so 8 centimeters different. So this is going to be a little bit faster, it's going to be a little bit looser, but you're going to get less leverage from the tail wing. So if you're good at keeping your foil fast and efficient, you can get away with a much smaller tail. It'll yaw a little more, but it'll also roll a little quicker. So this is sort of performance, lighter riders, advanced riders for efficiency. But you can definitely find a place for each of these tails and combinations. I've really enjoyed mixing up what you can achieve and find the bottom end and the limitations of each. So, because everything has pros and cons. So if you are a beginner rider and you're heavier, you're probably not going to start proning on the 720. You're going to start with the 980 and move towards the 850. Using a medium fuselage, I think is a really good starting point, unless you have a particular reason to go a little bit longer. And we're only talking 3 centimeters. So unless you have really good feels on the foil, you might not notice the difference in the fuse, other than that it is more pitch stable. The two masts, just for proning, I've been using this 75, and this is part of the reason why I jumped on Code. The construction and the high mod is exceptionally well made. I'm not a heavy rider, but I am heavier than some riders that say 80 kilos and under that don't notice as much flex in a mast, especially carbon masts. I used to ride and my hands used to fling around everywhere, and I realized that I was just trying to stabilize a foil while I was riding. So what they've done really well is to sort of beef up this top plate. This makes for a really stiff foil where a foil would normally bend, and you can actually bend alloy foils, masts, I've done that, and they bend at the top here. So having a thicker base plate that's extended down but tapered is really smart, because when you're on the water, obviously that's in the water and you're not on foil, but when you come up, ideally you're riding at the bottom of the sea, and this bottom third tapers down to a really nice thin profile around 14 mil thick, which is, if you ran that all the way up, yes, it might be a bit more efficient, but you might lose some stiffness, or you might pay more for the mast having to have ultra high mod carbon in there. This sort of deep tuttle tapered fuselage interlocks, mast to fuselage connection locks in really well. The bolts aren't doing the work. You can see that it's tapered here. So as you drop it down, it's going to tighten up on the connection, and being thicker and like they say it's a beefed up fuselage. I don't even think it's that thick. You get a lot of, you get backwash from the front foil. So having a slightly thicker fuselage isn't going to increase the drag that much, but it's actually going to make a really stiff, solid connection between the mast and where the fuse joins. So this, you can see the interlocking lugs. The guys have done a really nice job. So this is a locating lug, locks in, and you can see the fit and finish, the quality of this is really smooth, even to the recessed tail. So everything's really fluid dynamic, it's super efficient, but beefed up and giving that stiff, stable ride, which is super important for beginners and advanced riders. So both to give you the stability to be able to push your gear or to learn on your gear, but also have the confidence to start trying other things and not have your foil wobbling around at the wrong times. Really important when you're wave riding. The last time you don't want to fall in front of waves, especially when you're winging. So yeah, the 75 mast, perfect for sup foiling, prone foiling. I used it for downwind foil because I like to be able to adjust the pitch of the front wing to be able to get it up a bit quicker. I think Oscar did a really good video on that, about what's length mast to use for downwind foiling. The 85, I know some guys really like to prone this. I use this exclusively for winging. It's the right height that you can ride across sort of 15 to 20 knot chop and not have it hit your board, but it's got enough length to it that you're not having to worry about breaching or pitch control when you're foiling in bigger waves or winging or even towing. Again, really nice, strong, extended base, super solid connection, tapering down to that 14 mil and that really nice high mod construction. So it's really stiff, but really efficient. That bottom third, when you're in that zone, it's super smooth. And that's why I really enjoy riding the code foils, because when I first got the 850 off James, I took out a medium fuse and the 150 tail. I put it on my board, bang, I didn't have to shim it, I didn't tune it. It was just plug and play, away you go. The foil's actually better than me, so it sort of forced me to become a better rider. I feel like I'm becoming a better rider because I'm getting more time on foil. I'm having less dropouts, less breaches, less falls due to wobble, especially when I turn. I'm not having to think, all right, manage the tips, because I can breach these tips and keep riding out. So I really hope that sort of gives you a bit of a rundown on the foils, and you can reference where you're at on your foiling journey. If you do have any specific questions, please just call me. It's so much easier to talk to you about your specific needs, your board, your conditions, the winds, how you ride, where you're at. And the best thing is to do is that just we go for a ride, take these out for a demo, we put them under you, you get a feel for it and make sure it's right for you, because we want you to have really just the best time when you're foiling. I'm really enjoying this range. I'm looking forward to what else is coming out. It's exciting times in the foiling world. So yeah, really happy to be on board with code, and so please reach out and hopefully we can get you on some code gear and having a great time like me. Thanks very much.